Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Alex. I'm your host with Daily Chop. Thank you for being here. First off, I want to remind you guys to go ahead and click that like, subscribe, and share button for me. Hit that little bell at the bottom. But we are talking about human services. So I have my two special guests I'd like to bring up to you and introduce to you. One, you guys are already kind of familiar with her face, Natalie.
Hi.
Look at that beautiful face there, right there. And my other special guest, right up here, is Mr. Pat.
AKA the coffee field social worker.
Coffee field social worker. But it is Mr. Pat Grillo. And so, Pat, I thank you for being here. Natalie, I thank you for being here.
Of course.
And all of you, welcome back and thank you for being with us. How you guys been? What's new? Mr. Pat, I haven't seen you in some time, man. How you been?
Been going well. Things going well, and like I always say in my practice with my clients, there's always something that you can be positive about. There's always something to look on the bright side about. Mm-hmm. Even if it seems like everything is going wrong, today I woke up. I woke up on the right side of the grass.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
For sure.
And how about yourself? Hi, babe. How have you been, beautiful? Thank you for being here.
Good.
Again.
Yeah.
Good.
Doing good.
And
I'm tired, but doing good.
That's good.
Yeah.
What are some things you can say on social work that you've learned? And
so me myself, I'm not like a social worker. I'm a case manager.
Okay.
But it's kind of similar. Just can't practice outside of my scope.
I got you. That makes sense.
I mean, I love my job.
Yeah.
I do. I love working with youth and being able to have like an impact on them and seeing the fruits of it after you really spend time with some of your kids and clients and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it, and I think it's very meaningful.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. But I guess go ahead and start out, and I'm going to open up. What is for you guys trauma informed care? What is it, and why does it matter to families?
So trauma informed care, I actually just did a CEU series on trauma informed care, and it's something that I think everyone could benefit from knowing more about. Whether you're a social worker, a teacher, a case manager, a principal,
A therapist.
a therapist. I feel like everyone, just about every professional, can benefit from understanding trauma, because there's a lot of people out there that have trauma. Some people have complex trauma. And especially when you're working with children, trauma doesn't always look the same in children as it does in adults. And in fact, it rarely looks the same.
Yeah.
So when you practice with trauma-informed care, you recognize, hey, that first grader that's acting out in class, that's throwing chairs, that, dunked his classmate into the trash can, whatever the case may be, it might not be that they're just acting out or that they're a bully. There's something going on at home and they don't know how to express it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of times people get misdiagnosed with like ADHD when it's really PTSD or some trauma-related something going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
for sure.
So that's super important. And what are some initial things that you might see that would lead you, as a licensed social worker, for a parent? What would they look for? That it is trauma. Maybe they have been misdiagnosed, and what are some of the differences that they might be able to tell? Hey, has this happened to my kid, or is this going on with my kid? Have they experienced some trauma that they have not informed me about? What are some of the symptoms that you may see in that?
So this is where it's really hard to tell, because social workers are not mind readers.
Right.
And when we do an assessment, we're relying on the kid to give us accurate information. How many kids do you know that are going to tell you everything you want to know? You know, especially in the first meeting. So that's how those misdiagnoses happen.
Yeah.
I mean, there's things you can look for, like, let's say kindergarten, first grade, they were golden, you know, they were a model student, and all of a sudden their grades are slipping and they're acting out class and they're getting in trouble, and, you know, that could be a warning sign. You know, they used to love going to school and all of a sudden they hate going to school. They used to go to school no matter what, and all of a sudden they're having stomach aches 3 days a week. You know, that's when you should be asking the questions, what's really going on?
Yeah.
You know, children, you know, they may choose to not be honest with us,
Yeah.
but we should, you know, it's right there in the name, trauma-informed care. You know, we should have that understanding that there's a chance something's going on, to be asking those questions regardless of if we get the accurate answers or not.
Right.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And so, have you ever witnessed any of this, something like this happen before?
Absolutely.
Okay. How often does that happen?
I mean, the children that I see typically are the children that are, you know, brought to seek counseling. So the numbers of children I see where it's happening, I would say are definitely skewed to the right. But you know, of the children that come through for assessments, it happens really often.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's somewhat rare to see like what appears to be new onset ADHD and there not be something going on in the background.
Right.
Okay.
Of course, ADHD is a real thing.
Yeah.
It does exist. It can pop up, you know, where it didn't seem to exist before, and all of a sudden it's popping up. That can be a thing. But it's important to look for, you know, is there something else going on?
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes this is why we ask questions about, have there been recent changes in the home? You know, has there been reported abuse? Has there been something traumatic that may have happened to them, even if it may seem insignificant to the caregiver?
Yeah.
You know, we ask those questions, and it's like sometimes the caregiver is too close to the situation, so they don't think about the fact that, oh, you know, the parents got a divorce, and that happened in May of this year, and, you know, it was right around April that the kids started acting up. You know, that right there shows the timeline kind of matches up.
Yeah. And that makes sense completely, because I always tell Nat a lot, like, you know, the hardest thing for humans is change, and that's a huge change in a family, is once it goes from being a whole home to now it's a broken home. That's a big change. You're used to having your father there, you're used to having your mother there, but now they're not there, so now you got to try to, you know, they don't understand the change that they have to make or how to adapt to that change, you know? So that makes it hard.
Absolutely.
And well, that kind of brings me to my next question, which is the cycle of poverty and system impact. How does that affect? Does that make a big difference on some of these cases?
Oh yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah.
Like that.
For sure. I would even say, like, going on along the lines of both, like with what Pat was saying with kids being misdiagnosed. A lot of times too, that comes with, you know, a kid. You have to get to know a kid before, and don't get me wrong, some kids openly just will start talking and telling you all types of stuff. But a lot of times you have to build rapport with the kid. You have to build trust. And then eventually that trauma may come out, you know?
Right.
And I think a lot of times it will come out, but you have to get to know the kid. They have to feel safe with you. And I think too, like, yeah, a lot of changes can affect, you know, a kid at home and the way that they're behaving and the way that they're perceiving things. But I think a lot of that just has to do like with like what he's saying with trauma informed care is like really like being informed the proper way so that you can do your job the right way as well.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think that's building trust. Now you do get, like I said, the kid, you know, the one kid that'll just tell you his whole life story upon meeting him because he or she is probably, you know, doesn't have anybody to talk to. And so, you know, they kind of open up like a faucet and just, you know, spill it all out.
Right.
But to your second question about poverty, yeah, you definitely can see the differences between certain clients and how their poverty affects them, their whole family.
Yeah.
And even their behaviors as well.
Right. Now,
So,
what about on families that are, I guess, Pat, I don't know, you may have seen this more, but how about families that are in like foster care and stuff like that? Them being impacted by the system, how does that look and how does that work in that? Obviously, I'm sure there's way more trauma in kids that are already in the foster care system or that are involved in the justice system now, which, you know, I've had I'm starting to have little experiences with that here and there that, you know, are different. And how does that look in something like that, in a case like this?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, trauma can happen in any socioeconomic status. You know, it's not automatically. It's not automatically, you know, oh, a person belongs to this socioeconomic status, so they're going to be traumatized, and a person, you know, this person belongs to this socioeconomic status, so they're not going to be traumatized. Trauma occurs throughout all socioeconomic statuses. However, you know, data shows or appears to show that those that are in lower income situations, there's a higher potential that they've been exposed to trauma.
Right.
You know, somebody that lives in a neighborhood where there's a lot of violence, a lot of, you know, there might be gang activity, drug activity. That's traumatic. You know, even if it's normalized, you know, you're a child and you're witnessing this. And then you have the group of children, the group of kids that end up in the foster care system.
yeah.
And so these are kids that are removed from their family. They're removed from their home. There is, in most states, foster care is when there's no relative that is deemed fit to take them. So, you know, that gives a little bit of background about what the family life may have been like. If no relative, you know, they've looked at aunts, uncles, grandparents, nobody was fit to take them. They get placed into foster care. So that removal is traumatic.
Yeah.
Now they're in an unfamiliar environment.
Right.
They were removed, presumably, because of trauma. And then, now that they're in foster care, they're exposed to potentially more trauma. You know, by being exposed to kids that, you know, potentially have seen things that no child should see. They talk about it, that results in vicarious trauma. You know, there's a lot of trauma in foster care.
I think just being taken from your parents and, you know, put with strangers is traumatic in itself.
Absolutely.
You know?
I guess, how do you feel about that? Like, do you think that it eventually, does it pan out? Does it pay? Is there risk versus reward on that? How does that work out?
I mean, it depends. And this is what the child welfare systems in each state try to weigh out that risk versus reward. Is keeping the child in this situation
Good.
like
Yeah.
is it, even though there's stuff going on here, is it better to keep the child in this situation, or is it better in the long run? Is it so dangerous here that we're going to roll the dice and remove the child and put the child in foster care?
Yeah.
Honestly, it can turn into a no-win situation. Now, every case is different. Sometimes there is that reward that happens where they get placed with a loving family. They get that second chance. But I mean, we have millions of foster care youth throughout the country, and at one time, the one class I had when I was getting my bachelor's, it talked about homelessness and specifically homelessness with youth, and the number one homeless youth population, or well, they wouldn't be youth per se, but of kids that are 18 to 21, the largest percentage of that population that's homeless are foster kids that had aged out
Oh,
of the
Wow.
system. Because what happens is foster care, it can be a great thing, and you might get placed with a loving family, but then you live with them. Now you're 18.
yep.
You know,
You gotta go.
18 years old or graduation. That's the longest you can stay.
Yeah.
Now, in that, is there adoption? Or is there some that you have to be certified for adoption and just some of the families are not set for adoption? And obviously some of the kids are just, I would say, some of the kids still are just not a fit for the home. They're still causing disruption. And so it's easier for that foster care family to say, hey, you're 18 now. We can send you to someone that can help you with further assistance, such as ODJFS for Ohio or whatever state they're in. But that would be like the maximum help they could get.
Absolutely.
So,
And here's the thing too, with adoption, because there are a certain amount of foster families that are looking to adopt,
Yeah.
yeah.
and that is possible. It depends on the individual situation. Some kids are not eligible for adoption. Some families are not in a position to adopt, but sometimes it aligns and the family's willing to adopt and the kid's eligible for adoption. But here's the thing. What if that kid then, because of the trauma, because of, there might be mental health problems that are starting to pop up that the foster family isn't willing to deal with or isn't equipped to deal with, that kid becomes involved in the juvenile justice system.
Okay.
There is, and I recently found out about this, it is possible to have everything ready to go. And even actually, I think this can happen after the process is completed, where the kid gets adopted, right? You now are legally the child of this family. You become involved in the criminal justice system. That family can unadopt you.
Yeah.
Wow.
They can, disown you in the worst way possible. And now you're back where you started.
Yeah. I've actually seen that happen a couple times when I worked for another agency. The thing about, especially in Northwest Ohio, and I'm sure you know this, especially Defiance County, right? There's no group homes.
Yeah.
There's no group homes. So if you're even a kid that isn't a troubled kid necessarily, but you are going through foster care and you have nowhere to go, essentially, they put you in jail. They put you in JDC. There's some kids that I've seen I wouldn't say they weren't troubled, because I guess, yeah, the reason they are not, or they're separating from their family, is because there was issues. But sometimes it's not because of the kid. It's because of the family, and because they can't find placement for them.
Yeah.
I've seen where kids are waiting in JDC. And that's crazy.
To put them in juvenile detention.
Yeah.
Because
they have nowhere to put them.
Because there's no foster home for them.
There's no foster home.
You know, and our foster system in Ohio isn't great.
No.
No. You know.
And that kind of brought me to my next question, actually, what you were saying there. What are the things that are, I guess, challenges? We've kind of talked about the challenges that we have there. What are some of the things that have hope for the foster care system? And then, I guess into that, how could we improve the challenges?
That's a hard question.
So like you're saying, how can there be hope for the?
Yeah, like what's the hope that someone has, right? There is some type of hope for foster care, because like you said, it's a risk versus a reward, and if they decide they're going to roll the dice, what is the hopeful things that they can find at the end of foster care, other than some of the kids that end up being homeless? Mm-hmm. What's the opposite side of that? What's the hopeful side on something that was like a positive thing? They're not adopted, but is there positivities for a kid that turns 18 leaving the foster care system?
I mean, there are foster parents out there that, even though they didn't adopt the kid, mm-hmm. now that the kid's 18, there's nothing that says, at that point it's up to the foster family. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that says they have to get kicked out.
Okay. Right.
There's nothing that says they have to cease all contact. Mm-hmm. And there are foster parents out there that are, loving foster parents that really do put their heart and soul into trying to give these kids the best shot they can.
Sure.
And, for whatever reason, didn't or couldn't adopt the kid, but didn't find it in their heart to just kick them out when they were 18.
Okay.
So you do have success stories like that, or, foster families that they do the best, even though they know they can't adopt the kid, they do the best to set the kid up for success. They provide a loving home, they provide, structure, resources, they provide
stability.
The tools that the kid is going to need to be successful after they turn 18. Yeah.
There's families, like there's a family specifically I know that has done that and does that, and I've seen, in Defiance, and I've definitely seen the hope and the fruits of that, and I'm sure for them too, they had the option once the kids were 18 to be like, hey, you got to bounce, but didn't.
Yeah. So there's still hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. That's great. Mm-hmm. Now the one thing that I was asking is, for you guys personally, what could you guys add any personal insight to say, I think this could help the system? Do you guys have any insight like that? Or have you guys seen things that it's like, okay, this in the foster system didn't work as well as, and I guess it'd be more geared for you as a licensed social therapist. Like, have you seen things that you think could bring or need improvement in the foster care system?
That's really a hard question. I haven't spent a lot of time working in the foster care system.
Okay.
Most of my work has been outpatient therapy. I do have a couple of years under my belt working with kids. Some of those kids have been in foster care. But as far as what the solution is,
it's hard to say.
Some things don't have a solid solution.
Yeah.
Because, like, one of our major metro areas here in Ohio, they got to the point about 10 years ago where there's just a, emergency level shortage of foster parents.
Yeah.
Wow.
And So the requirements in that county used to be that you had to be a married couple, you had to own your home, you had to show financial stability. I mean, and I feel like having those requirements made it more, the odds were more in favor of the kid that they were going to a safe environment. Well, they enforced those requirements, and now they create a situation where it's like we are outnumbered 10-1, but foster kids to foster families. So they opened it up, they loosened the requirements, and now they're at the point where it's like, heck, you don't even have to live in the county. Like,
Yeah.
I lived the next county south of this place, and they reached out to me. Now, I'm a single guy
Right.
that rents. At the time, I rented, and I only had a 1-bedroom apartment, and they reached out to me.
Wow.
Wow.
That's how desperate they had
Yeah.
gotten. And, it's like there's two extremes of the spectrum here, where, you don't want to get to the point where you just want a body.
Right.
Right.
But you also can't go so strict that so few people in that county
Can do anything.
can fit those
Yeah.
requirements. Somewhere in the middle, are you financially stable? There's people that rent that are financially stable.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you provide a loving home? But as far as a solid answer,
It's hard.
it's hard to come up with one. Yeah.
The one thing, like I said, with the group home, I mean, I wish there were more group homes, because some of the ones that I've, experienced in the city in New York when I lived there, like there was like a runaway home that I interned for, and they had a couple in the county. So sometimes it just confuses me that I feel like we don't have that here.
Yeah, it's the, well, here I guess it's a smaller
It's
place,
a smaller
right?
place.
So, that goes with the underserved. But I guess now in that, being that you're talking about New York, how does in the underserved areas, how does that play in with race, class, and culture?
Well, I mean, I would say a lot. I mean, I wasn't seeing kids that came from money. I'll tell you that. And I definitely wasn't seeing kids that I predominantly saw minorities. I think maybe there was a couple of white kids that were there. But yeah, again, like it depends on the area that you're in, but a lot of times you're going to see, minorities and kids that come from poverty.
Right. Oh man, that's crazy. And Mr. Pat, how about you? What have you experienced in that, on as far as insight? Have you had much of where you've dealt with just certain races, or has it been open? I know you've probably worked in a few places where it's been an open cultural, because you said you've done a lot of outpatient, correct? So,
absolutely. The area of Ohio that we live in, let's be real, it's 95% white. So I don't have a whole lot of data. A lot of my social work practice has been this part of Ohio. I don't have a whole lot of data to kind of do a side-by-side comparison and show that, hey, this group is underserved. I'm sure that even though the numbers are so small, there's often disparities in funding. However, like when I first got licensed, I came from a major metro area, and there's still significant disparities. You have resources in certain parts of the county, but a lot of those resources are centered right around the western part of the county,
Right.
Yeah.
which is not where
the problems actually.
The problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've often said that, a lot of times there's access issues. There are resources that are right downtown, right in the city center. But why, if I'm going to open up a sober living house, am I going to put it in suburbia?
Yeah.
Yeah, addiction happens there, but that's not my target
I know.
clientele,
Right.
And then I feel like you don't get the best care that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because,
Well, yeah, because, I mean, obviously, if you're in a lower poverty area, now you're going to have a vehicle, which a lot of single mothers don't have to drive 25. If you're in a metro area, which all of us have lived in a metro area, get to one side of the town to the other, at least me from San Antonio, it's 25, 30 minutes from the west side to the east side.
right.
And that's what I would drive for when I was putting the girls through grieving therapy. It was a 30-minute
far,
drive.
yeah.
A 30-minute drive, and that was the only one in the city. Was on the east side, and I'm coming from the far west side of San Antonio. So to imagine, kids that are living, on the west side in the hood of San Antonio, now they got to drive to the east side, but a parent's got to take a bus. That makes it even more complicated to receive that help.
I think privately too, like when you think about like private practices, private resources, like, you're going to run into the amount of money like you're having to spend. So like if you don't have government assistance, you're you're going to be paying a lot of money,
Right.
Oh, you want to go to private practice?
Well, right.
Good luck.
Right. You want to go to a private practice. I think what I'm trying to say is like, if you're a person who really needs help and the only thing available to you is something like a government assistance, program, sometimes you don't get the best quality of help because,
Right.
Then you run into, obviously, like we said, we care about our jobs and, I don't want to say that everybody doesn't care about their jobs, but the thing is like you get an overabundance of a caseload, and it's hard for you to manage everything. And
Now, you saying that, I have another topic, I guess, on this, and so since you brought that up, I'm gonna go ahead and ask it. For you guys, setting boundaries and self-work for helping professionals, where do you guys learn and have you guys had experience where like, okay, man, I should have set a boundary here for myself? So I kind of, we was talking about the kids, but I kind of want to start switching it over to where you guys now, have you guys been in a situation where you were like, man, there should have been a boundary there for myself? And how, can you guys, I know we can't speak on everything but HIPAA, but what you guys can, can you guys attest to that?
yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure.
Boundaries are very important in social work. Boundary issues, boundary crossings. It's public information. Like when a social worker screws up, they publish it. Like sometimes it ends up in the news, but it always ends up on the board's website, and you can read about that. Like you not being a social worker can go onto the board's website and read about who screwed up this month and what's going to happen to them because of it. And I would say, if 50 people a month get in trouble, 40 of those are boundary crossings.
Yep.
Like inappropriate relationships of some sort.
Or practicing outside of your scope.
Well, that's not boundary crossing. That's a separate issue.
It is.
But
I just had to throw that in there.
boundary crossings are, and the thing is, it's not always as blatant as people think.
As people think,
people think, oh, just don't sleep with your clients.
Right.
Right.
Obviously, you're not going to do that. But I mean, it's very. You gotta set that boundary.
Yeah.
Your clients are your clients. They are not your friends. They are not your. They are. They are nothing but your clients, and the. I don't mean for that to sound like jaded. You know, you should regard your clients in a high regard.
Absolutely.
But when we start, we blur that line, and when we care too much, we can actually
Do ourselves harm.
We can do harm because we lose the ability to think, to be
professional.
well, not only to be professional, but we lose the ability to look at the situation objectively.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if I'm working with a client and I invest too much of my energy into this client's success, I start taking on responsibility for this client, I lose the ability to be objective.
Yeah.
So here's another question in that. Why is it important for healers? Why healers need healing too?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Never trust a therapist that doesn't have their own therapist.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I mean, I could see that because you're literally your job is to help others understand and sort through their emotions to try to get that under control. And I'm sure it can be overwhelming and
Absolutely.
stressful doing that day in, day out. And even more after 2020 because of COVID, it became this thing of now you can't actually sit there with your client. It's going to be on a face-to-face. And I'm sure that changes a lot.
Absolutely.
Did you notice an effect in that when I don't know if you were doing
You're talking
therapy
about
then?
telehealth?
Yes, doing telehealth nowadays.
Yeah.
Like, have you experienced that from 2020? Did you notice? I don't know if you were doing therapy then or not.
So I didn't become licensed until 2021.
Okay. Okay.
So this is pretty much the new normal is pretty much all I've ever known. I will say though, from my perspective, from somebody that's only been in the field in the telehealth era, there are certain situations where I really, really hate telehealth. There are certain things that should not take place on telehealth.
Yeah.
I can see that.
I pretty much refuse to do anything that can turn into a significant crisis on telehealth.
Yeah.
If it's that big of a crisis, I need that person face to face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if that person's on camera, you know, you reasonably should have an idea where they're at. You should have an idea how to contact them, who their emergency contact is. I mean, this is all telehealth best practices. But that doesn't stop you from, or that doesn't stop them from going and, you know, turning their camera off and, like,
Right.
heading toward the bridge, or
Yeah.
you know, and it's just or you have technology issues.
Yeah.
Technology has its purpose. There are certain situations I love using telehealth. I've facilitated groups on camera. I loved it. With the right group of people, the right group topic. You know, it's perfect. But then there's other situations where telehealth should not be used.
Yeah.
So it's a delicate balance. But it definitely adds to that stress.
Yeah.
Where, in addition to COVID and all the stress that added to us 5 years ago that everyone felt,
Yeah.
you have this whole new dynamic of social work. It's like the field transformed overnight, and you know, everyone had to get used to it in the snap of a finger.
Yeah. I was one of those people. I worked at an agency that we transferred, or we started doing telehealth during COVID. and we were working with kids, so it was very hard.
Yeah.
Because
Kids
you
are a
can't.
group of people that I hate doing telehealth with.
Yeah, like you can't even keep them focused. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was really difficult for me to do my job then, and I think that, like he said, like there's only so many situations you could do that in.
Yeah.
You know, I personally would rather do in person. You know what I mean?
Right.
For my own therapist. You know, so it's like, I'm sure some people would rather prefer being, together.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I feel like agencies like fully capitalized off of
Telehealth.
COVID and like the telehealth. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, I guess another hard question that I had here that I want to ask you guys, because it seems like telehealth is pretty hard. Burnout and compassion, fatigue and care, and professionals. Have you guys experienced that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
how did you deal with that? What did you see, Natalie?
For myself personally?
Yeah. Have you dealt with that?
Yeah. You like Pat said, you have to keep boundaries. So like when you have a personal phone and a work phone, after work hours, you have to let your clients know, like an emergency line that they have to call, because your phone really should not be on.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was kind of hard when I knew kids were struggling. And I think I got burned out really fast, like wanting to try to help, and then the parents are calling you as well, and you got your own family to take care of, and your own husband and things like that. And I definitely was super burnt out at one point with a couple of different agencies that I worked for. The other thing is the workload. Like I said, you especially being I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this, but through Medicaid, you have a big caseload.
Well, yeah, I think we was talking about that earlier with Pat. He was saying, the shortness in workers, the need, need for social workers, is just super. It's
high
needed.
demand.
It's high demand right now.
There's a social worker shortage, and part of that social worker shortage, it ties into it has everything to do with 2020. It has everything to do with COVID and burnout, and because there's a lot of social workers that left the field. There's social workers still today in 2025. I see it on the social work subreddit talking about wanting to leave the field.
Yeah.
Social work is a very high stress, high demand field.
Yeah.
So we have these mass exoduses that happen. And at the same time, we simultaneously have these agencies that pop up because, some agencies only see the dollar signs.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you have these two things happening at the same time. So you have new positions being created and less social workers to fill them.
Right.
So then the social workers that do fill them, I mean, I've worked at my second job in the field. My first job, I didn't have caseloads. It was a different type of position. But the second job that I took on after getting licensed, my caseload initially was 40. That, like, right away, poof, here's 40
Wow.
people. It peaked at, I believe, 150 was where it peaked out.
But that's crazy.
The amount of stress of being responsible for 150 people, a lot of them with high acuity, that's where... so then people get thrown into that, and then they get burned out, and then they leave, and...
Now, where do those clients go?
So then some other poor sap gets hired, and gets that caseload, and it's this revolving door.
Cycle, yeah.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that was not an isolated incident. I've had a handful of jobs in the field over the years. There were a couple of them that I didn't have a caseload per se, where it was a little bit different type of work than having a set caseload. But it's like people, there's this fine line that agencies walk where, you want staff retention so you can keep those caseloads low. But you also, obviously, you want to hire quality staff, and very few agencies have that balance met where they're able to keep those caseloads low, and keep the client count high. So, I mean, I would say right now in the outpatient world, like even in this area, I would say the average caseload is probably 100 based on what I've observed.
Wow.
For therapy. For case managers, I'm not sure. It may be higher than that for case managers.
Wow.
But yeah, so that's where you end up, you have the burnout, then you have people that just leave the field entirely.
I think the other thing to remember too is in understanding the way that these interventions work is if they're not documented, they didn't happen.
Yeah.
So a part of our job too is doing the documentation. And I'm sure every single case manager, therapist right now, like we all hate documentation.
Yeah.
Because not only are you putting all of your energy into meeting with your clients, providing therapeutic interventions, oh my gosh, talking to the families, finding resources, transporting them, picking them up. I mean, then you got to go do the documentation.
Right. And a lot of these agencies, they give you a caseload of 100 people, and they expect you to have the documentation done that same day.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They're giving you 8 people a day to see, and the common. The most common way that these agencies want you to do it is concurrent documentation. So I'm seeing a client.
And I'm documenting.
At the same time. I mean, in my opinion, we've taken it to the level of impersonal. And I've done concurrent documentation to a certain extent, but I will not have my focus over here and not on the client.
Right.
It's just too impersonal.
Yeah. So I'm kind of running out of time here, but I want to ask you guys one more question.
Okay.
What is it do you think that the public gets wrong about social work? What do you guys think? Like, what do you guys know in that? What do you think they feel that they get wrong that you hear a lot?
So, as we've mentioned a few times on this podcast, I'm a licensed social worker, LSW. So, in Ohio and pretty much every other state, social workers go through college. They learn a variety of skills. They take a test. They get that ultimate LSW, and people in the community, people that are not familiar with the field, they hear that term, social worker. A lot of times their mind goes straight to, you're the person that works at JFS and works with all these people that are leeching off of the system. Okay, here's a fun fact. A lot of the people that work at JFS do not have an LSW.
Right.
Or their mind goes to, you just take people's kids away.
Yeah.
You can work at JFS in my field. You can work in child welfare in my field. But a lot of people, when they get that LSW, they go into therapy.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the most common reason people get licensed is so they can practice social work and do outpatient therapy. And I feel like so many people misunderstand what social workers actually do. Where they...
Case managers as well. Yeah.
Case managers too. Yeah, they're thinking about JFS. They're thinking about child welfare. They're not thinking about me sitting in an office drinking coffee and helping a child work through their complex trauma.
No.
You
right.
know.
I think
are putting in all the hard work.
Right. And I think one of the other things that I run into is like parents who want or are seeking out like a babysitter.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I can see that
they
for sure.
think like I'm a glorified babysitter. And then when you're getting into the ins and outs of like the interventions and they're like, wait a second, like, what are you doing with my kid?
Yeah.
Like, and you're just like, bro, do you know what you signed up for? Do you know what this is? Like,
Yeah.
these are therapeutic interventions. Like, we are helping your child and family.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of families and certain specific people can fully take advantage of that. And then I think that also causes like the burnout, the just frustrations that you feel because you're just like, I'm taking this seriously. Are you taking this seriously?
Yeah.
And the other thing is this. I forgot to mention this when you were talking about like what you can run into. We can do all the work, right, with the kid, with the client, right? We can do all the work. In fact, we're seeing great changes when we talk to them, but then they're going right back into that environment.
Absolutely.
So if you're not one of those people or one of those types of social workers or case managers that work with the entire family, you are definitely going to feel some burnout because you're going to keep experiencing these things with these kids because the families are not making the changes. The families are not making the adjustments. The parents are not getting it, right?
Yeah.
So that's a part of another problem with case management. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, I appreciate you guys having this conversation with me.
Thank you.
There were some things I really didn't even get to that I had on my list that I think need to be talked about. So I'd like to have you both back.
Absolutely.
If you guys would be willing to come back and discuss some more.
For sure.
Because I think there's a lot of families out there that don't have knowledge on what social work is and the different aspects of social work, just like Pat was saying. Not everybody's here at Job and Family Services. Not everybody's at CPS. The people that are actually putting real work behind your kids and trying to get them help and change their mental health and teaching them coping skills, thought reframing, changing how they think, that's these guys right here. So thank you guys for putting that work in. Thank you for being the first line defense for our public. People talk about public safety all the time, but they don't talk about what this means to be, a social worker that does this type of job for our country.
Right.
That's really putting in and sees the nasty things that go on in our community. From all the way, whether it be sexual abuse to just homelessness. If kids ever even experienced homelessness because there was a single parent that couldn't get assistance at the time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that that these guys do. So Pat, Natalie, thank you guys so much. I greatly appreciate you guys for being here. So,
Absolutely.
Thank you guys.
And real quick, if y'all look for one of the first episodes of the Coffee Field Social Worker, we're also going to talk about social work and what the profession is. And so check it out.
Yeah, coming soon.
Going to be dropping in a few weeks here, the Coffee Field Social Worker.
Yeah, and we'll be back. We'll be back to talk about this again.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much. And to you guys, like I said, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and we'll talk to you guys next time. God bless.